Welcome to Continue Cooking with Monte Cristo, live on Twitch and YouTube. On today's episode of Continue Cooking, we'll be making miso soup.
Okay, let's make some miso soup. This miso soup recipe is from J. Kenji Lopez Alt. He has a great cookbook called The Wok. Obviously, he's very famous for doing a lot of science-based experimentation around cooking. I'm a big fan of his. The reason why we're using his miso soup recipe is as follows. So when we make dashi, which we've done before, dashi is the stock that is created from using some combination of kombu, which is kelp, and katsuobushi, which is bonito flakes, fish flakes from the skipjack tuna. Now, the way that dashi is typically created is that there is an initial, very light simmer, or not even simmer, just getting it up to temperature and then steeping of the ingredients that creates a very clear and light broth. This is called ichiban dashi, or first dashi. Now, those same ingredients are then used to boil more aggressively after you strain them out and then cook them a second time at a more aggressive boil or simmer. And this creates niban dashi, or second dashi. Now, second dashi is what is typically used for miso, and the first dashi is used for more delicate broths, okay? Now, we want niban dashi, okay? And why we're using Kenji's recipe is because he basically has created a technique that makes niban dashi the first time around. Because we don't have a need, and you probably don't have a need, to create two separate batches of stock, because you might not use the first one. If you are very Japanese, or you love Japanese food, you may actually want to do both versions of it, and we did more of an ichiban dashi when we created the Okinawa soba. And in that case, you'll notice, if you were paying attention to our dashi creation, then it was a very quick simmer on the katsuobushi, which made a clearer broth, okay? So the ingredients that we're using today are going to be pretty simple overall. So first things first, what we're going to do is we're going to make the dashi. And in order to make the dashi, we need the kombu, and that's what this is. In Korean, it is called dashima, which is this kelp, right? And it's going to come in big sheets of kelp. We are going to use katsuobushi. The katsuobushi is the dried fish flakes from the skipjack tuna. This is the key ingredient of miso. It is miso paste. This is what is called awase miso. Now, awase miso means it's a mixture of red and white miso. You use whatever you want. If you want a stronger, saltier flavor, you may want to use the red miso. If you want a lighter flavor, you might want to use the white miso. If you want the nice bridge between the two, use the awase miso, which is what this is. And then we've got some ingredients to add later on. This is wakame, which is seaweed. It says miyok. It's the same stuff as wakame. This is cut seaweed, as you can see here in English. This is silken tofu. It's a nice soft tofu. In English, if you were to go to an Asian market, this would be called silken tofu. These are just green onions, which we are going to be using. And also, we're going to be using 1.5 quart or 1.5 liters of water. That is 6 cups of water, guys. So the first thing we're going to do is this is 4 cups, so I'll have to add a couple more cups. So we have to make our dashi as the very first step of this process before we actually finish making the miso. And I'm going to get our handy dandy kitchen scale out. And you're going to use about 3/4 ounce of bonito flakes, or katsuobushi. That is, in metric, going to be 25 grams. I prefer to use grams for this because it's just more precise. So we will remove a sheet here. I'm going to go ahead and put the katsuobushi over here into the pot. So we are going to boil this from cold, basically. We're going to use 15 grams of the kombu. Kombu is very lightweight. So we're going to take this sheet. It should be, I'm going to guess, having done this before, we're going to have to break it into a smaller piece just to fit it in there. Only 9 grams. There we go. Perfect, nailed it. First time. Nobody saw the other one. First time. I'm gonna snap these in half a little bit just so they fit nicely into the pot. So I end up with these 4 pieces. I'll go ahead and put these into the pot. And we do very much have to keep an eye on our dashi as I turn this on to high, because what we're going to try and do is we're going to boil it, but as soon as it starts to boil, we're going to reduce it to a very light simmer. I'm going to set a kitchen timer here for 5 minutes. The reason why we have to be very careful about this, and we don't want it to boil too much, and we want to get it down to a very light simmer, is because it can become very bitter, dashi, if you boil it too much or you steep it too much, and it's a very fine line with some of these flavors. So we really want to make sure that we are being very gentle with it. A lot of Japanese cuisine is about clean flavors and being very precise and gentle. So I have this now basically on the lowest setting possible. You'll notice though that we are simmering this longer than the dashi we made for the Okinawa soba broth base. That one, we basically brought it up to a simmer for maybe like 15 seconds and then pulled it off the heat and let it steep. We are going to be simmering this for a little bit longer, which is 5 minutes on the timer. Let's talk about this silken tofu. So we're going to gently pop this out of the packaging. It is very jiggly.
Hold on.
All right, so let us cut this into slices here. You don't want to make the tofu cubes too small because otherwise they will kind of fall apart, even though we are going to cook this very gently. It also depends on how big you want your tofu cubes. Seems like a pretty good size to me. I'm cutting this package into 8 tofu cubes. There's our dashi alarm.
Dashi alarm.
So we're going to turn off the heat now. The heat is completely off and we're going to let this steep for a little bit longer. Give it 1 stir. We return to our tofu cutting. The toppings you're going to put into the miso soup are just personal preference. You could put mushrooms in here. You could put like those old dried anchovies. I like mine with the tofu and the green onions. We're going to use 15 grams of the wakame, and we're going to go ahead and rehydrate this real quick. So go ahead and use ½ ounce of this. Okay, so I am going to rehydrate this, and we'll leave that maybe for 5 minutes. I just like the same consistency to my miso soup, so I don't want larger pieces of seaweed in there with the smaller tofu cubes and then also the green onions, right? Just going to move all my tofu into this here bowl. It's going to come apart just a little bit. All right, it's time to strain our dashi. It's been sitting there for long enough. We're going to use this fine mesh strainer here. Strain out the kombu and the katsuo bushi, and I will press it a little bit with the back of this wooden spatula, and then we end up with this beautiful, little bit dark, pretty intense dashi. Dashi just going to go back in the pot now. It's very simple. We don't need to wait for it because we're just going to make the miso soup now. Now that it's strained, dashi go back in pot. Let's take a look at our miyok again. So our miyok, you can see, is now quite large. So it's going to come, even when it's already been pre-cut, it comes in these really big pieces. It's hard to bite these because they're kind of long. And so that's why we want to go ahead and cut these down to a smaller size. I'm going to turn the dashi onto low. So again, we don't want to boil this. So we're just going to keep it warm basically. And we're going to use our fine mesh strainer that we use to filter out the fish flakes, and this is how we're going to introduce the actual miso paste to the soup. We're going to use 6 tablespoons or 1 tablespoon per cup of water, or 250 mils of water. You are of the metric persuasion. So I'm going to put this back in here, and this is the trick from Kenji. So I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of miso, 2 tablespoons of miso.
Can you do it as Count Dracula?
A 3, a 4, a 5, a 6 tablespoons of miso. So why we're using the fine mesh strainer, and the technique is we want to make a really smooth broth of miso. And the miso paste is going to have some bigger grains of soybean inside of it. So shout out to Kenji, just a great way to gently introduce the ingredients into the miso soup. And basically what we're gonna be doing now is just warming through our other ingredients. Because I put the wakame I rehydrated in a different bowl, I don't want to introduce a bunch of water content, so I'm going to squeeze it prior to introducing it to the miso soup, because I don't want to add more water and dilute the dashi. So the tofu here has, as I put it in this bowl, has lost some of its water. So I don't want to, again, I don't want to add a bunch of additional water, so I'm just going to drain the tofu slightly. And everything about this needs to be gentle from this point forward. Again, we're warming this up, so I'm going to return. I'm going to just warm that. And as long as it's not going to boil, we can kind of just keep it on super low, or simmer too much, we can just keep it on super low. Let us go ahead and cut 4 of these green onions. We're going to slice them very thinly. This should be enough. I'm going to save some of the greens for garnish for the teriyaki. Give it a good swirl. Yeah, look at that. This should be some great comfort food. Miso soup, just so good. That is excellent.
All right, guys. So until then, please continue cooking. Bye.